Jake Morrison stood in front of the large window in his office, watching the stars twinkle in the black space outside. Station Alpha 7 was quiet today, just like most days. As Earth's ambassador to this part of space, Jake spent most of his time reading reports and attending boring meetings. He never expected anything exciting to happen. The communication panel on his desk started beeping. Jake walked over and pressed the green button. The holographic display came to life, showing a figure he had never seen before. The alien was tall and thin, with blue skin and 4 arms. Behind him stood 12 other aliens, all different shapes and sizes. "I am Chancellor Vexter of the Galactic Council," the blue alien said. His voice was cold and unfriendly. "You will listen to what I have to say, human." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. The Galactic Council was the most powerful group in known space. They controlled hundreds of worlds and thousands of species. Humans had been trying to join their group for years, but the Council always said no. "We have been watching your species for some time," Vextar continued. "Humans are spreading too fast across the galaxy. You build weapons and fight wars. You are dangerous to the peace we have worked so hard to create." Jake wanted to speak, but Vexter held up one of his 4 hands. "Because of this threat, the Galactic Council has made a decision. You have exactly 72 standard hours to do 3 things. First, you must give us complete control of all human military forces. Second, you must stop making all weapons and destroy your weapon factories. Third, all human leaders must come to our space stations where we will keep them safe under our protection." The words hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. They were asking humans to give up everything that made them free. No military, no weapons, no freedom for their leaders. It was complete surrender. "If you refuse," Vextar said with a smile that showed sharp teeth, "we will show you what happens to species that do not cooperate with the Council." The transmission switched to show 3 different planets. Jake recognized them immediately. New Dakota, Riverside, and Port Liberty were 3 of humanity's newest colony worlds. Each planet had thousands of human families living peaceful lives. As Jake watched, bright flashes of light appeared around each planet. The orbital defense platforms that protected the colonies suddenly went dark. One by one, every defensive system shut down. The colonies were completely helpless. "This is just a small example of our power," Vextar said, as the view returned to the council chamber. "We can turn off your defenses anywhere, anytime. Your weapons cannot protect you from us. You have 72 hours to make the smart choice." The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone in his office. His hands were shaking as he reached for his communication device. He needed to contact Earth immediately. Back on Earth, President Lisa Hayes was in the middle of a budget meeting when her emergency communicator started flashing red. She had never seen it do that before. Red meant a threat to all of humanity. "Excuse me," she said to the people around the table. "I need to take this call." She pressed the device, and Jake Morrison's worried face appeared on the screen. "Madam President, we have a serious problem." 20 minutes later, President Hayes sat in the underground war room beneath the White House. Around the long table sat the most important people in human government and military. Admiral Ben Carter, head of the Space Defense Force, looked grim as he studied the data on his tablet. "The energy readings are real," Admiral Carter said. "We detected the same kind of pulse near all our major space stations and military bases. Whatever technology they used on those colonies, they can use it anywhere." General Roy Baker, the top military commander on Earth, shook his head. "Our intelligence reports about the Galactic Council were wrong. We thought they were just a group of peaceful traders and diplomats. We had no idea they had this kind of military power." Dr. Amy Foster, who studied alien cultures, raised her hand. "I've been looking through our records about the Council. Something doesn't make sense. If they're so powerful, why did they wait until now to contact us? And why give us a warning instead of just attacking?" President Hayes leaned forward. "What are you thinking, Doctor?" "I think this isn't the first time they've done this, Doctor," Foster said. "I need more time to research, but I have a feeling the Council has a pattern. If they find young species like us, create a crisis, then offer to protect them. It's a way to take control without looking like the bad guys." Admiral Carter slammed his hand on the table. So what do? Can't fight them if they can turn off our defenses. But we can't just surrender either. If we give up our military and our leaders, we'll be slaves forever. The room went quiet. Everyone knew he was right. Humanity faced an impossible choice. Fight and probably lose everything, or surrender and definitely lose everything. President Hayes stood up slowly. We need more information, Dr. Foster. I want you to find out everything you can about the Council and what they've done to other species. Admiral Carter, quietly contact all our military bases and colonies. Tell them to prepare for anything, but don't panic the civilians yet. She looked around the room at the worried faces. And I want our best scientists and strategists working on this problem. There has to be a third option. Humans have survived everything the universe has thrown at us so far. We're not going to give up now. As the meeting broke up, President Hayes stayed behind with her closest advisors. Through the thick walls of the underground room, she could almost feel the weight of 8 billion human lives depending on the decisions they would make in the next 72 hours. The countdown had begun. Dr. Amy Foster had not slept for 18 hours. Her office was covered with papers, computer screens, and empty coffee cups. She had been digging through every piece of information humanity had about the Galactic Council. What she found made her stomach feel sick. The pattern was clear once she knew what to look for. The Council had done this exact same thing 17 times before. They would watch a young species grow and develop. When that species started exploring space and building colonies, the Council would create a crisis. They would claim the species was dangerous and needed protection. Then they would offer to help. But only if the species gave up all their freedom. Amy printed out the files and ran to the war room. President Hayes and the other leaders were still there, drinking coffee and looking tired. The countdown clock on the wall showed 51 hours remaining. I found something important, Amy said, spreading the papers on the table. The Council has been doing this for over 1,000 years. They've conquered 17 different species using the same method they're trying on us. General Baker picked up one of the papers. The Altarians were forced to give up their weapons in exchange for protection from a threat that never existed. The Kepler colonies surrendered their government after the Council disabled their communications. This is exactly what they're doing. To us, Admiral Carter studied another report. Look at this. Every species that surrendered became workers for the Council. They mine metals, grow food, and build ships, but they never get to keep anything for themselves. Slavery with extra steps. President Hayes felt anger growing in her chest. So the Council isn't trying to keep peace in the galaxy. Dare. Building an empire by tricking species into giving up without a fight? Amy nodded. And once a species surrenders, they never get their freedom back. The Council keeps them weak and dependent. After a few generations, they forget they were ever free. The room went quiet as everyone understood what this meant. Humanity surrendered. Their children and grandchildren would grow up as slaves. They would never know what it felt like to make their own choices or dream their own dreams. We can't let that happen, General Baker said. But we still have the same problem. How do we fight an enemy that can turn off our weapons? President Hayes stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see people walking to work, children playing in parks, and cars driving down busy streets. All of those people were counting on the leaders in this room to protect them. What if we don't? Fight them the way they expect? She said slowly. Admiral Carter looked confused. What do you mean? The Council expects us to either surrender or try to attack them with our military. What if we do something completely different? Dr. Foster leaned forward. Like what? President Hayes turned around with a small smile on her face. Show them exactly what they're dealing with? What if we prove that they picked the wrong species to mess with? General Baker raised an eyebrow. You want to tell them our secrets? Not tell them? President Hayes said. Show them, Amy. How much? Do we actually know about the Council? Not just the public information, but everything? Amy thought for a moment. More than they think? Our spy satellites have been watching their space for years. We have detailed maps of their territory, information about their military bases, and economic data from their trade routes. We even know about some facilities they try to keep secret. What about their member species? President Hayes asked. You've been in secret contact with several of them, Admiral Carter admitted. Not official contact, just some of our traders. And explorers making friends. Some of those species aren't happy with how the Council treats them. President Hayes walked back to the table. Here's what I'm thinking. The Council is used to dealing with species that are afraid and alone. They've never had to deal with a species that knows all their dirty secrets and has friends throughout their empire. General Baker started to smile. You want to turn this around on them? Exactly. Instead of responding to their ultimatum, we give them our own ultimatum. We tell them to stop oppressing other species, or we'll help those species fight back. Foster looked worried. That's very dangerous. If we make them angry, they might attack us immediately. They're going to attack us anyway, Admiral Carter pointed out. If we surrender, we become slaves. If we refuse, they'll try to destroy us. At least this way, we're not facing them alone. President Hayes nodded. Amy, I need you to prepare a complete file on everything we know about the Council's crimes. Roy, start contacting our people who have connections with the oppressed species. Ben, I want you to prepare our hidden military assets for action. Hidden assets, General Baker? Asked. Admiral Carter smiled for the first time in hours. The Council thinks they know about all our military bases and ships. They don't know about the ones we built in secret. We've been preparing for something like this for years, even if we didn't know it would be the Council. As the leaders started making plans, something else was happening on the frontier worlds. The humans living on New Dakota, Riverside, and Port Liberty were not sitting around waiting to be rescued. They were doing what humans had always done when faced with a threat. They were adapting. Governor Pete Walsh of New Dakota called a meeting. Of all the colonies, engineers, and mechanics, our orbital defenses are down, but that doesn't mean we're helpless. We need backup power systems, hidden communication arrays, and emergency shelters. If the Council thinks we'll just wait here like scared rabbits, they're about to learn something about human nature. On Riverside, marine biologist Kate Morgan was organizing underwater construction teams. We can build hidden bases under the ocean, she explained to the Colony Council. If they attack from space, they won't think to look underwater. Word was spreading from colony to colony through secret channels. The message was simple. Humanity would not go quietly into slavery. Every person, from soldiers to farmers to school teachers, was preparing to resist. Back on Earth, President Hayes looked at the countdown clock. 48 hours remained. In 2 days, the Council expected humanity to surrender or face destruction. Instead, they were about to discover that they had awakened something they were not prepared to handle. The human response was taking shape. It would change everything. Chancellor Vextar sat in his huge chair in the Council's main meeting room. The room was the size of a football field, with seats for representatives from all the member species. Today, only the most important leaders were present. They had gathered to watch humanity surrender. Vextar felt very pleased with himself. In his long life, he had seen 17 species kneel before the Council's power. Humans would be number 18. He had already prepared his speech about mercy and wisdom. It was the same speech he gave every time. The human deadline ends in 10 minutes, announced his assistant, a small green alien with 6 eyes. Their response should arrive soon. Around the room, the other Council leaders talked quietly among themselves. Some were already discussing how to divide up human territory. Others planned which human colonies would make the best worker camps. None of them doubted that humanity would surrender. Young species always did. The large screen at the front of the room came to life, instead of the expected message of surrender. They saw President Lisa Hayes sitting behind a wooden desk. She looked calm and confident. Behind her stood several other humans in military uniforms. Greetings, Chancellor Vextar and members of the Galactic Council, President Hayes said. We have received your ultimatum, and we have prepared our response. Leaned forward in his chair, the human's tone was not what he expected. She did not sound afraid or defeated. She sounded like someone who was in control. Before we give you our answer, President Hayes continued, we thought you should know exactly who you are dealing with. We've been very busy during the past 72 hours. The screen changed to show a detailed map of Council space. Every planet, every space station, and every military base was clearly marked. But this was not just any map. This showed things that were supposed to be secret. Hidden weapons factories, prisoner camps, and slave labor facilities were all labeled clearly. Vexstar felt his 4 hearts start beating faster. How did the humans know about those places? The locations were classified at the highest levels of Council security. "We know about the labor camps on Kepler 44b," Resident Hayes said as the screen showed pictures of aliens working in terrible conditions. "We know about the illegal weapons testing you do in the Outer Rim systems. We know about how you steal resources from your so-called member species." The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Several species representatives jumped to their feet, demanding to know if the accusations were true. The Altarian delegate was shouting at the Zephyrian representative. The Centauri leader was pointing angrily at Vexstar. "But we know much more than that," President Hayes continued, and the room went quiet again. "We know about your pattern of conquest. 17 species have fallen to your lies. Create a crisis, offer protection, then turn free beings into slaves." The screen showed documents proving everything. Trade records showing stolen resources. Communications between council leaders planning the enslavement of species. Video evidence of the secret facilities. It was all there, laid out clearly for everyone to see. Dr. Amy Foster appeared on the screen next to President Hayes. "We have studied your methods very carefully, Chancellor. We know exactly how you operate. The question is, what are you going to do now that your secrets are exposed?" Vexstar tried to speak, but no words came out. In 1,000 years of council rule, no one had ever challenged them like this. No species had ever gathered this kind of evidence. No one had ever turned the tables so completely. Admiral Ben Carter stepped forward on the screen. "Perhaps you are wondering how we learned all of this. The answer's simple. Humans have been preparing for galactic politics much longer than you realized." The display changed again, showing human ships throughout Council space. But these were not the ships the Council knew about. These were vessels that had been operating in secret for years, gathering information and making contact with oppressed species. "We have been watching you watch us," Admiral Carter said. "While you were deciding whether to conquer us, we were learning everything about you. We know your strengths, your weaknesses, and most importantly, we know your crimes." General Roy Baker appeared on the screen. "You gave us 72 hours to surrender our freedom. We are giving you the same amount of time to begin dismantling your empire of lies. Every day you delay, we will liberate another world that you have enslaved." The screen showed real-time footage from 7 different planets. Human ships were arriving at each location, but they were not attacking. Instead, they were broadcasting the truth about the Council to the local populations. They were showing the evidence of slavery and oppression. Were offering help to anyone who wanted to be free. On the Altarian homeworld, crowds of people were gathering in the streets. They had seen the proof of what the Council had done to them. They were demanding answers from their leaders. Similar scenes were playing out on other worlds. Colonel Ryan Pierce appeared in one of the video feeds. He was standing next to a group of freed prisoners from a Council labor camp. "The people of this world now know the truth about their so-called protectors," he said. "They are choosing freedom." President Hayes returned to the center of the screen. "You see, Chancellor, you made a critical error. You assumed we were like the other 17 species you conquered. You thought we were alone and afraid. You were wrong on both counts." The transmission began to end, but President Hayes had one final message. "We are not responding to your ultimatum. We are replacing it with our own. Stop oppressing innocent species, or we will stop you ourselves. You have 72 hours to begin making things right." The screen showed coordinates for a neutral space station. "If you want to discuss terms for the peaceful transition of power, we will meet you here. If you choose to fight instead, you will discover that humanity does not negotiate with bullies. We defeat them." The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in complete chaos. Species representatives were shouting at each other. Some were demanding immediate military action against humanity. Others were calling for investigations into the revealed crimes. Several delegates were already walking out, declaring their species' withdrawal from the council. Vexstar sat in stunned silence. He had expected to add another species to his empire. Instead, he was watching that empire crumble around him. Humans had not just refused to surrender, they had declared war on everything the council represented. For the first time in his long life, Chancellor Vexstar was afraid. The chaos in the council chamber was like nothing Vexstar had ever seen. Representatives from 12 different species were shouting at each other. A Starian delegate threw his ceremonial staff at the Zephyrian ambassador. The Centauri leader was demanding immediate access to the secret files that humanity had revealed. "This is madness," Vexstar said to his assistant. "How did a primitive species like humanity get access to our most classified information?" Before the assistant could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the massive space station. The emergency. Lights flashed red, and automated voices announced a priority alert. Something was happening across council space, and it was happening fast. The main screen flickered back to life, showing urgent reports from council military bases. Admiral Ben Carter appeared on the display, speaking calmly as chaos erupted around him. "By now, you have received reports from your commanders across the galaxy," Carter said. "I want to assure you that no council personnel have been harmed in our operations. We are not here to start a war. We are here to end one." The screen split into multiple views, showing human ships at 7 different locations. But these were not attack formations. The ships were small, fast, and clearly designed for rescue operations rather than combat. Colonel Ryan Pierce appeared in the first view, standing on the surface of the Altarian homeworld. Behind him, thousands of aliens were walking out of what looked like a prison camp. They were carrying their belongings and helping each other move toward human transport ships. "The forced labor facility on Altari 3 has been evacuated," Pierce reported. "We found over 10,000 workers who were told they were volunteers. When we showed them the truth about their situation, they chose to leave." The second view showed Captain Sally Brooks on a frozen planet in the Outer Rim. She was standing next to a massive weapons factory that had been built inside a mountain. Workers were streaming out of the facility, carrying boxes of documents and computer drives. "Now, the illegal weapons testing facility on Frost 7 is being shut down," Brooks said.
The local population was told this was a research station.
They had no idea their government was building weapons of mass destruction here. One by one, the reports came in from other locations. Secret prisons were being emptied. Hidden weapons factories were being exposed. Forced labor camps were being liberated. Most shocking of all, the operations were completely peaceful. The human forces were not fighting anyone. They were simply showing people the truth and offering them a choice. Vexstar watched in horror as his carefully built empire began to crumble. The species he had controlled for centuries were learning the truth about their situation. Many were choosing to leave council space entirely. Others were demanding that their leaders explain the secret agreements they had made. "Sir," his assistant said nervously, "we are receiving reports from our homeworlds. The populations are demanding explanations about the facilities that have been revealed." The worst news came from the Zephyrian Empire, Vexstar's own species. The humans had somehow obtained copies of the original treaties that created the council. These documents showed that the council was never meant to be a permanent government. It was supposed to be a temporary alliance to fight a common enemy. That enemy had been defeated over 500 years ago, but the council had never dissolved. "The people of Zephyria are calling for new elections," the assistant continued. "They want to choose new leaders who will renegotiate our relationship with the council species." Similar reports were coming in from other council worlds. The Centauri Parliament was demanding a full investigation into council activities. The Kepler colonies were threatening to declare independence. 3 smaller species had already announced their complete withdrawal from the council alliance, but the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Jake Morrison appeared on the screen, standing in the council's own archive building. He was holding a datapad and smiling. Chancellor Vexstar Morrison said, "I wanted to thank you for keeping such detailed records of all your activities. Your own files prove everything we have accused you of doing." The camera panned to show thousands of storage devices and document files. Human technicians were carefully copying everything under the supervision of Council security officers who had apparently decided to cooperate. Your security chief, Commander Zane, has been very helpful, Morrison continued. He was quite upset. When he learned what the Council leadership had been doing without his knowledge, it turns out that many of your own people were not aware of the true nature of your operations. Vexstar felt sick. Commander Zane had been his most trusted security officer for over a century. If Zane was helping the humans, it meant that even his own species was turning against him. The transmission continued with President Hayes reappearing on the screen. She was sitting in what looked like a command center, surrounded by screens showing the operations across the galaxy. Chancellor Vexstar, you now have a choice to make, she said. You can continue to fight against the tide of change, or you can help us build something better. The old system of fear and control is over. The question is whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. General Roy Baker stepped into view. We have evidence that many Council species were deceived by their leaders just as much as the species you conquered. We are willing to work with anyone who wants to create a true alliance based on equality and mutual respect. The screen showed the neutral space station where humanity had proposed to meet. Several ships were already docked there, displaying the flags of species that had broken away from the Council. The meeting will begin in 24 hours, President Hayes announced. All species are welcome to attend, whether they were Council members or Council subjects. We will discuss how to fairly distribute the resources that were stolen, how to repair the damage that was done, and how to create a new system of galactic cooperation. Dr. Amy Foster appeared one final time. We have learned from studying your empire, Chancellor. We know that power corrupts when it is concentrated in the hands of a few. The new alliance will have built-in safeguards to prevent any one species from dominating the others. The transmission ended with a simple message displayed on the screen. The old galaxy is ending. The new galaxy begins tomorrow. Vexstar sat alone in his chair as the Council chamber emptied around him. Representatives were leaving to report to their home governments. Military commanders were receiving orders to stand down. The empire he had spent his life building was collapsing faster than he could comprehend. His assistant approached carefully. Sir, what are your orders? Vexstar looked around the empty chamber that had once been the center of galactic power. In less than 72 hours, humanity had accomplished what centuries of rebellion had failed to achieve. They had not just defeated the Council, had made it irrelevant. Prepare my ship, he said quietly. Suppose it is time to learn what this new galaxy will look like. The neutral space station looked different than it had just 1 week ago. Ships from dozens of species were docked at its many ports. Some were former Council members. Others were species that had been enslaved for centuries. All of them had come to discuss the future of the galaxy. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through the crowded corridors, amazed at what he saw. Aliens who had been enemies for generations were talking peacefully. Former slaves were sitting at the same tables as their former masters, working together to solve problems. It was something he had never thought possible. The main meeting hall was enormous. With enough seats for representatives from every known species in the galaxy, at the center of the room was a circular table where the most important negotiations were taking place. President Lisa Hayes sat at one side of the table, facing Chancellor Vexstar across the polished surface. The Zephyrian leader looked older than he had just days before. His blue skin seemed paler, and his forearms moved slowly as he spoke. The weight of watching his empire collapse had clearly affected him deeply. Still did not understand how you did it, Vexstar said quietly. How did a species we barely knew about manage to gather so much information about us? President Hayes smiled. You made the same mistake that bullies always make. You underestimated your victims. You thought we were isolated and afraid. You forgot that humans have been dealing with people like you for our entire history. Dr. Amy? Foster, who was sitting nearby, opened a large book filled with historical records. Every human civilization has faced tyrants and oppressors. We have learned that the best way to defeat a bully is to expose their lies and unite their victims against them. Admiral Ben Carter leaned forward. You also made a tactical error. You assumed that because we were new to galactic politics, we were unprepared for them. In reality, We have been preparing for contact with other species for decades. We just did it quietly. The truth was even more impressive than the Council had realized. Humanity had not just stumbled into their counterattack. They had been planning for something like this since they first detected signals from other civilizations. Earth's governments had worked together to create secret programs that prepared for every possible scenario. The spy satellites, the hidden military bases, the secret contacts with other species, General Roy Baker explained. We built all of that because we knew that space was dangerous. We just never expected the biggest danger to come from the people, who claimed to be peacekeepers. Vexstar nodded slowly. And now my people want me to answer for what the Council has done. Half of the Zephyrian government has resigned. The other half is demanding that I be put on trial for crimes against other species. What do you want to do? President Hayes asked. The question seemed to surprise Vexstar. What do I want to do? I'm a former dictator whose empire has collapsed. I assumed you would simply execute me or put me in prison. President Hayes shook her head. That would not help anyone. The people who are hurt by the Council need their worlds rebuilt and their freedoms restored. That is more important than punishment. Around the room, other conversations were taking place. Representatives from the liberated worlds were working with engineers and economists to plan reconstruction projects. Former Council military officers were helping to design new defense systems that would protect everyone instead of oppressing anyone. Captain Sally Brooks was explaining to a group of Altarian leaders how humans had managed to build underwater bases that the Council never detected. Colonel Ryan Pierce was teaching former prisoners how to organize democratic governments on their home worlds. The knowledge sharing was happening everywhere. There is something I do not understand, Vexstar said. I had the power to destroy the Council completely. Could have conquered us the same way we conquered others. Why did you choose to offer cooperation instead? Dr. Foster answered. Because we learned from studying your history. Empires built on fear and conquest always fall eventually. We wanted to build something that would last. The new galactic alliance that was taking shape was very different from the old Council. Instead of one species controlling all the others, every world would have an equal voice. Instead of secret facilities and hidden agendas, all decisions would be made openly. Instead of forced labor and stolen resources, trade would be fair and voluntary. We call it the Galactic Cooperation Treaty, President Hayes explained. Any species can join if they agree to treat others with respect and dignity. Any species can leave if they want to. No one will be forced to do anything against their will. Vexstar was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Your species is very dangerous, President Hayes. The human leaders looked at each other, unsure how to respond. But Vexstar continued with something that might have been a smile. You are dangerous to tyrants and bullies everywhere. You have shown the galaxy that oppression does not have to be accepted. You have given hope to species that had forgotten what freedom felt like. He stood up slowly and extended one of his hands. The Zephyrian people would like to request membership in your new alliance. We want to help repair the damage we have done. President Hayes stood and shook his hand. Welcome to the new galaxy, Chancellor. Over the following months, the transformation continued. The forced labor camps became schools and hospitals. The secret weapons factories became research centers focused on improving life for everyone. The prison planets became new colonies where former prisoners could build free lives. Jake Morrison returned to his office on Station Alpha 7, but now was the headquarters for the new Alliance's diplomatic corps. The view from his window was no longer empty space. Dozens of ships came and went every day, carrying trade goods, scientific knowledge, and messages of friendship between worlds. Dr. Amy Foster published her research about the Council's methods, making sure that future generations would recognize the warning signs of tyranny. Admiral Carter worked with former enemies to create a new defense force that protected everyone equally. General Baker helped train the security forces of liberated worlds. The shockwaves from humanity's response had spread throughout the galaxy, but they were good shockwaves. They carried the message that freedom and cooperation were stronger than fear and oppression. They showed that even the most powerful empires could fall when their victims united against them. Years later, when young aliens learned about the great change in galactic civilization, they would remember the lesson that humanity had taught everyone. Bullies only have power as long as people are afraid to stand up to them. Once someone finds the courage to fight back, the bully's power disappears like smoke in the wind. The Council had tried to blackmail humanity, but humanity's reply had indeed sent shockwaves that changed everything forever.